Good evening, everybody. My name is Sally Berkery. I'm the Managing Director of CW UK. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to have so many of you with us. As well as providing events focusing on specific sectors of the beauty industry, CW has for many years provided skills-based events such as this one. And I'm really delighted to welcome Georgina White, a learning and development leader with 18 years experience in the beauty industry, to CW this evening. In a digital world where so much of our communication is delivered via email, text, WhatsApp and the like, are we neglecting the skill of how to speak in public with presence and impact? In today's competitive market, it is key to be able to talk with confidence and deliver your message in an engaging way, whether it's on a stage in a formal setting or wanting to get your point across in a face-to-face meeting, rare as they may be right now, or participating in one of the many important Zoom conversations we're now having. This evening's session will focus on delivering an engaging message, both in person and on camera. And later this month, on the 16th, we'll be welcoming Georgina back to help us learn how to deal with nerves and be present with our audiences. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Georgina, and she'll be happy to answer any questions you're going to have at the end. So please do keep these coming through via your Q&A panel at the bottom. Thank you. Georgina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sally, and hello everyone. I hope that you can all hear me okay, and it's great to be here. I hope that you're all well and that your family are all well and that you're surviving lockdown. And I don't know about you, but I've actually enjoyed the time to be able to get online and do some learning seminars, a bit like this one, because actually in my normal kind of old normal, I never really got the time to do that. So it's great that you're joining us this afternoon and this evening. I want to start actually, if I may, by asking you a couple of questions. You don't have to answer them out loud, just think about them in your head. So first of all, have you ever been in a situation where you have had something important to say, but not quite been able to get it out in the right way? Or have you perhaps had the responsibility of making a speech, but are left at the end thinking, how could I have better engaged the people that I was speaking to? Or have you ever subconsciously sabotaged yourself mid-presentation by suddenly understanding, what am I going to do with my hands, and focusing on that rather than focusing on your material or the people who you're speaking to? And I have to say that in the years, and it's about 25 years that I have been working as a learning and development professional, I could probably answer yes to all of those questions multiple times. And I have to say that when I've been practicing the skill of public speaking, I have been learning by doing. I actually just want to stop there and bring your attention, first of all, to two words I just used: practice and skill. Skill, not art, because I do believe that it's a skill of public speaking that you can learn. All you actually need is some self-discipline and a little bit of tips and techniques or strategies that you've learned along the way, and of course practice. I don't think anyone gets better at anything by avoiding the opportunity to do it. So like I said, that is how I've learned. Of course, along the way, I mean, I started my career actually in the Selfridges beauty industry and in the beauty hall. And the first experience as a career professional that I had of speaking in public was to do the morning meetings and the training sessions to the whole of the Selfridges beauty hall. And I have to say, at the age of 21, it was terrifying at first, but I don't know, you kind of just do it and grow with it. And along the way, on that journey since then and now, where I lead a European team in the luxury retail sector, I have to say that I have had lots of opportunities to go to presentation skills workshops and seminars. I've even done theatre workshops, some slightly strange and surreal ones at that, I have to say. I remember when I was working at Kenneth Green Associates as the head of training there, about 15 years ago, I went to a French brand and they made us do a theatre workshop, which started out as really useful and really fun. And after about 3 hours, it kind of got strange as we were all told to pretend to be trees, which I guess helped us with the art of pausing and being silent in presentations. I've also learned through TED Talks. There's some great content on YouTube. I'm sure a lot of you are watching. and I've learned by reading some great books. And at this point, if you're really interested in this subject, there's 2 books that I just want to mention and do a call out to. These are recent reads of mine, and I really liked them. Viv Groskop, first of all, How to Own the Room. Really, really great for anyone that's looking for more confidence as a public speaker. And Caroline Goyder, who's a voice coach, she has a book called Find Your Voice, which I also recommend as well. So apart from all that, as I said, actually probably the best way that you can learn, and that I've learned myself, is just to do it and to critique myself afterwards, learn from feedback from participants, and just understand what went well and what maybe could have gone better, and then apply those things the next time. So what we're going to do this evening is we're going to have a format where I will speak to you for around 30 minutes or so, and I will also ask you a poll in a minute as well to understand a bit about you, so you can feedback to me. And then also, as you think of questions, you can jot them down in the chat, in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and I will address some of these at the end before handing back to Sally. So like I said, let's start with a poll. So I'm going to ask Carrie to launch the poll. There's 2 questions, one about how enjoyable you find speaking in public, and the other one is about the things that you'd like to improve. So we'll launch that now. Okay, so I can see about 75% have voted already, or almost at 88%, that's great. And actually there's a really, I can see on the screen, there's a really mixed response to that. So if one was not enjoyable at all, we've got about 22% saying I really don't enjoy it, and then there's about 13% at the other end of the scale who have voted number 5, I find it extremely enjoyable. And then probably the interesting one is sort of somewhere around the middle. So 35% are saying number 4 and 17% are saying number 3. So I think I can end that now and move on to the next question. And so this one is, I think if the next question comes up, yes, thank you, Carrie. This is about which areas you would like to improve upon. And I've just jotted down a few different areas, from structuring your speech to controlling nerves, to looking at body language. So answer this one as well. It's interesting actually, because I can see already that well over half of you have said controlling nerves, i.e. stopping shaking, thinking positively about the audience, etc. Always when I've run public speaking skills training in the past, the participants, there's been a high number of them who have said to me, I just wish that I could get the nerves under control, because I feel okay about preparing the speech, but then actually delivering it, it's another matter. And actually we've got a whole session on, I think the 16th or 17th, it's the 16th of June, to say let's have a look at dealing with nerves and tips and techniques. So I'll deal with all of the nerves thing there. We've also said about 46% I can see said they'd like to understand or improve on how to structure the speech better. We will definitely cover that today. Body language, 42% are saying body language, 25% are talking about tone of voice and improving tone, speed, volume. Another thing that people often say to me is, oh, I don't know how to stop rushing. That sometimes is tied up with nerves. And then a lot of you, so again, over half of you, how to get more confidence on camera when you're doing video calls or seminars like this one. So we'll end the polling there. Thank you, Carrie, for that. And that's now closed, and I can see, yeah, the highest is both controlling nerves, audience engagement actually, so audience engagement, keeping people interested, and video calls. Okay, so really interesting, thank you for that. That's brilliant that you could get involved. I always think that one of the most important things is to understand who you're speaking to and what they need. As a trainer, that's definitely true, so it's really interesting that you did that. So I think if we can close that one, I can go and share my screen and just give you a taster of what I'm going to cover this evening. So I'm not going to share my screen throughout. I'm actually going to flit in and out of the PowerPoint. So I've got a couple of slides now, and then I'll close off the PowerPoint, and then I'll bring back a couple of slides later. But in true learning and development professional style, I have condensed my speech into 5 key points. So we have the 5 P's, as it were. So we have preparation, participants, passion, powerful pauses, and personality. So they're the things that I'm going to cover this evening, and just give you some of the insights that I've learned along the way in the years that I've been doing public speaking. And preparation is the first one. And actually, if we're talking about nerves, so a little bit of a taster of the nerves session, actually one of the biggest things that I found that you can do to combat nerves is to prepare properly. It has been the times that I haven't felt prepared in life when I've given a speech where I haven't enjoyed it, or where I've left feeling disappointed, or maybe not able to engage with the audience so well. So preparation is absolutely crucial. And I think if you have the first rehearsal, like the first time that you speak it out loud as the live show, what you're doing actually is you're presenting but in your own head, rather than being able to be comfortable with the participants because you're comfortable with the material. And I think that is a really, really key point. If you're prepared, you can relax. You not forget about the material, but it's kind of there subconsciously, and you can focus on your delivery. So I think that's a really, really strong point. And I think Abraham Lincoln had a really good point when he said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So for me, sharpening the axe is about thinking about what I need to say, and also thinking about who I'm speaking to. So the first thing to remember, therefore, is that actually it is not necessarily just about your material and what you need to say. It's also about who you need to say it to, and spending time thinking about that. And when you're preparing, the thing that I do, and the thing that I've learned to do, is ask myself why. So what the objective is, why am I giving this presentation, and share that objective with the audience. So you know from the blurb at the top of the session that we want to share with you this evening our tips and tricks and techniques to help you feel more confident and enjoy engaging an audience better, whether it be on camera or real life. Thinking about who your participants are, so who you're speaking to and what they expect. And I have to say that early on in my career, I did a really big no-no with this. I kind of just assumed that I knew the audience, and realised that I was pitching my speech really completely in the wrong direction. So for years I was a perfume trainer, specialising in fragrance, and early on I went to, I think it was a perfume shop conference, or no, it might not be, I think it was a boutique, actually it was a Hermes boutique training, and the participants just didn't have a clue about fragrance. So they didn't even know the difference between an eau de cologne and an eau de toilette and an eau de parfum. I was pitching it way too high in terms of experience. I had to really backtrack and go back to basics. And I think that also is really important, that if you haven't prepared that and you realise and gauge that of the audience, you gauge the mood of the room, you have to be flexible enough in your presentation and delivery to backtrack and adjust and adapt on the fly. Your participants will thank you for it. And then obviously knowing the must-knows are really important for eliminating timing issues. So I have to say, I think that my good friend and ex-KJ colleague Sarah is on the line, and she will tell you, if you asked her, that I'm not great at timing. And one of the things that I've really had to learn throughout my career is that if I prepare well and know what I can leave out, then if the timing gets tight, then I can just go to the must-knows. And I think that that is a really key point. Another good piece of advice that I've had over the years is from a long time ago from another learning and development professional in my early days at Kenneth Green Associates. And she said, tell a story. So people love stories, it's very compelling, and your presentation and your speech could be built with an introduction, a beginning, a middle, and an end. My colleague used to say, tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them you've told them. And here we see that as repetition. And again, repetition is another key trick in structuring your speech. Said brilliantly by another quote that is a favourite of mine, which is this: if you have an important point to make, this is Winston Churchill, don't try to be subtle or clever, use a pile driver. Hit the point once, then come back and hit it again, and then hit it a third time, a tremendous whack. And creating a strong beginning and a strong ending will really give your presentation that whack or that impact, repeating your message. And how could we do that? So if we're thinking about strong beginnings, what could we do to format our beginning? Here's some ideas on the screen. Storytelling, like I said, maybe you want to tell a story and that begins your presentation. Actually, if you're into watching TED Talks, I recommend Bryan Stevenson, who is a human rights lawyer. He did an amazing TED Talk, and it was all about identity, but he begins literally for me with a masterclass of relaxed, easygoing, confident manner in a personal story about his childhood that really draws you as a participant into that speech. It's very compelling. And if you don't want to tell a personal story, you could always begin with someone else's story, maybe someone you know or something you've read. Or a famous quote. I've been doing a couple of quotes. There'll be a couple of more in the slides that follow later on. You could share a did you know fact, a rhetorical question, which actually is quite nice then to answer at the end to tie everything up with a strong ending, or maybe a funny anecdote, or even a joke if appropriate. But again, knowing your audience, that's how it comes back to the participants. You will know whether that is appropriate or indeed not. So I'm just going to stop sharing now so that you've got me in the screen again, which brings me on to my second point. So I just said that you should tell a joke or a funny story, but only if you can and if it's appropriate. And knowing about your participants, and that's my second P, is so vital here. And also the reason I've included participants as one of the headings in this talk about how to create more impact and presence and engage your audience is because if you think of your audience as participants, what you're doing then is you're shifting the focus from your speech or your presentation being a broadcast to it being something where people are participative in, i.e. taking an active, not a passive role. And that's really important because if you think of your audience as participants, then what you're doing is you're then having a conversation. And I think now more and more people are wanting that conversational style. It doesn't mean that you don't prepare, but you've got to prepare enough so that you come across like you're talking to a friend. And actually that is easier to do if your mindset is about the audience as if you are having a conversation with them. And if you think about a conversation, it's not a monologue, is it? You talk and you listen. So you've got to be able to listen to your participants as well. In the training sphere, actually, one of the things that I've kind of grown up with is a shift and a change of mentality around how people think about a trainer. So as a trainer back in the late 90s, when I sort of first started, giving my age away, as a trainer, you were a presenter, you were on stage, a ta-da moment. Whereas perhaps you might get that in the odd big conference where the audience are in pitch black and the lights are on you nowadays, but more and more, and especially on video calls, people are starting to shift or have shifted the thinking to trainers being facilitators, which puts much more emphasis on the people that you're speaking to rather than on you. And I think that that's really important, is that at the end of the day, it's not about you. I think that's one thing that I've always remembered or tried to remember in recent years when I'm giving a presentation or a speech, is that it's not about you, i.e. it's not about me, it's about the people that I'm speaking to. So when you're face-to-face, that's much easier, I have to say, because you can look at people's body language and eye contact, engage their reaction, and then adapt accordingly. You know, do I need to ask them a question? Do I need to repeat something or clarify something that I just said if you see some puzzled faces in the crowd? On video call, it's not so easy because I can't see you. What I'd like to do is to give you some tips of how to involve people when you are in a video call or a video conference. And actually this works whether you're face to face or not. One of the things is to ask questions. So again, like the poll at the beginning, you can do things like that to gauge where people are feeling or how they're feeling. You can use the Q&A like we're doing tonight. You might, in some video calls, actually set discussion topics, or be able to even use breakout room features to get some discussions going where people then discuss in small groups and come back to you. Or even you can use quizzes. Everybody loves a quiz question. So all of these things will help kind of just get the audience interested. And have you ever been in an audience and been a participant of a speech and perhaps wanted to ask a question but couldn't get a word in edgeways? Or have you found yourself zoning out because the person isn't asking you a question? And I think even if it's just a hypothetical or rhetorical question where you're not expecting someone to answer back, like I'm doing to you now, then at least by me asking a question, it gets you to think. I think that's a really good tip as well. And so what I'd quite like to do is I'd quite like to, since I mentioned video calls, is share my screen again and see if I can get my screen. Here we go. Then what I'd like, some of the tips that I have about being more engaging on camera, because again, we've had to all adapt to this in the new normal that we find ourselves in. So first of all, let's have a look at where the camera is and where we are looking. So one of the things that people do all the time is they forget to look down the lens of the camera. So on the picture here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the lady, I just snapshotted these from YouTube videos. She's looking directly down the camera lens. And actually, I found personally that's easier if you buy a webcam. Because the tiny little pinhole camera at the top of the laptop isn't always easy to see. So I've got quite a big webcam that I'm now looking at. And I imagine actually that as a third person. If you look at yourself, which I'm now looking at myself, or if you look at the screen or the other people that are on the screen, what you're doing is you're breaking eye contact suddenly with your audience. And I think it's fine if you can see other people on the screen or need to glance at your presentation to glance up and down, just like you wouldn't kind of stare out one person in a room. But I would always recommend that you remember to look at the camera, certainly for the majority of your time. And again, I'll mention Sarah, because Sarah at KJ and I, when we were working together, we started a YouTube channel. And this is a few years ago now. And one of the first things that we ended up doing is ditching the monitor that shows us, because then we ended up speaking to ourselves rather than speaking to the camera. So again, try to ignore yourself, because that's just really distracting. You end up kind of fixing your hair or obsessing about your roots, which I definitely could do, rather than actually focusing on what you're saying or who you're speaking to. And then the other things to remember, of course, are your environment. So the lighting, the backdrop, all of those things. You don't want to be sat in the dark, and you don't want to be sat in a mess. It just gives a really bad professional tone, whereas it's much more professional if you tidy, you know, all you need to do is just tidy up your backdrop. And maybe remove some of the clutter like you see on screen here, and then just make sure you're well lit. So in terms of background, there's some kind of, for me, some do's or don'ts. On the top of the slide here, it's kind of my preferred picture out of the three. This lady with the blonde hair and the denim jacket on, she's got a really nice, uncluttered, tidy, yet personal background. There's some kind of personal objects which gives some authenticity, which is nice. The lady in the middle there with the black jumper, she's got, for me, that's quite a busy background. And I think that if there's too much going on in your background, your participants want to kind of look at that more than they want to focus on you and your content. And then also I would be wary of doing something too plain. So if you're sat against a plain white wall, for example, that can just be quite flat, dull and boring. So again, just sort of think about those things. Again, I know at the moment we have to work with what we've got in our house. But for example, I've actually turned my desk round so that I'm facing a window. Because lighting is quite important, and it also means that you've got a slightly better backdrop that you would have had if my desk was round its normal way, which then you just see my clutter in my office, which is never that good. Eye level camera works so much better by lifting your laptop up. So I've got about 3 box files that I use and put the laptop on top of that rather than have the laptop on the desk, because as you can see in these 2 examples, it's really unflattering if you've got your laptop tilted upwards so that the camera is literally looking at your chins. And if you, I don't know whether you knew this, but if you speak with your chin up, you actually get a better and more energetic speaking style. What it does is because speaking is all to do with alignment and giving space to your lungs, and also ensuring that you've got space for your breath, because speech is breath after all, you are actually allowing yourself and giving yourself half a chance to get a better delivery rather than looking down, which really changes the tone of your voice. So I think that's important. And then the other thing I would say, which somebody did the other day, I was on a video call with somebody and they sat really close to the camera, which just had the impression of them invading my space. And all I found myself kept doing is kind of move. I actually can't go too far back because I'm attached, but I wanted to move back because I was like, whoa, you're too close. So I would suggest sort of arm's length from the camera is probably quite a good bet. Lighting. It's so hard to get lighting right. I'm telling you this because I've got multiple different lighting scenarios going on in my office right now. Natural lighting from a window works really well, but actually it's really dull and cloudy today where I am. So I've set up a couple of desk lamps, and I found a great tip on YouTube. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, you literally can fall down a rabbit hole of YouTube videos on the subject of where to put the lights and where to put the camera. But somebody said, if you get a spotlight, you know, just a normal desk lamp, and put baking paper over the front of it, because baking paper obviously goes in the oven with your cakes that I know everybody's making at the moment. And what that does over the top of the spotlight is that it just gives a soft focus light, which is actually more flattering than a really harsh light, and also a harsh light can blind you. So yeah, light source from behind the camera is really important, not from behind you. You know, big tip, don't sit in front of a window. Again, I was on a video call, I think it was yesterday actually, and I was trying to meet, or I was meeting somebody new, a new colleague. I still haven't met her because actually I have no idea what she looks like, because she was sat with a window directly behind her. She was completely in the dark. So I literally just sat talking to a shadow, which was rather disengaging. A couple of others on lighting. Lighting from overhead can be really unflattering because it kind of casts shadows on the bottom of your face. And if you light yourself from below, also it's kind of scary, a bit reminiscent of the torch telling ghosts, you know, under your chin, telling ghost stories in the tents. Did anyone do that? I did that as a child. And then obviously, I don't need to say this to a room full of people in the beauty industry, but professional presentation works so much better than being too casual. And I think there's a lot of people who are working from home at the moment who are kind of turning up to video calls and making a presentation in their gym wear or a hoodie, which kind of never gives the right impression. Okay, so the other thing to remember here actually is just because you're doing a lot of video calls and presentations right now, don't forget about the importance of body language. And actually, body language is really, really important. Tone of voice is really, really important. And both these things help to convey your passion. And passion is my third P. So conveying passion, conveying enthusiasm, smiling. I know it sounds crazy, but if you smile when you're speaking, just lifts your whole mood and your audience's. And it's really, really true that the emotional state that you are in when you're with your participants speaks more volume than the words that you say. And so passion is really key, because if you're not interested in what you're talking about, why should anyone else be interested? So as Nicholas Boothman said, who is an author, it's much, much easier to be convincing if you care about your topic. Figure out what's important about your message and speak from the heart. So really, really good tip there. And that is also conveyed through tone of voice and through your non-verbal signals. So non-verbal signals are key. Like here we have two ladies who are doing it quite well. Use your hands to emphasize a point, but don't have them kind of flapping around, flailing around all over the place, because that can just become distracting, I find. And I think a lot of people who say, well, I don't know what to do with my arms, I don't know what to do with my hands, just relax. You know, often before a big speech or a big presentation, might sound silly to you, but often I just go somewhere private, you know, if I'm with people, then the toilet, and I just shake it out. Just shake it out. Because if you're relaxed, then your arms will just do what they do normally, and then you don't need to worry about them. I think if you bring too much attention to them, what you're doing then is you're sort of obsessing over things, you know? So I think for me, using natural hand gestures that you would do normally in conversation by just relaxing your body and relaxing your arms is really key. And actually, there was a YouTube video that I saw the other day, which I really liked. And there was a lady on there called Amy Chapman, who's another voice coach. She coaches lots of YouTubers. And she talks about the power box, which is this kind of square here in your sort of torso and head. And that's why it's a good idea to get the camera to have this in the shot, so that this is the area where you can gesture really nicely and professionally. So it goes without saying, but be careful about demonstrating closed body language, like crossing your arms, and be careful of touching your face or fiddling with your hair. Again, too distracting. And actually, somebody who I find brilliant at public speaking and using gestures in a really controlled and authentic way is Barack Obama. He's famously good at this, and Michelle too, actually. And if you watch videos of this pair, you can see how they are not only mastering their considered body language, but they're also really mastering my fourth P, which is the importance of pauses. And the way that we use our voice, including the pauses, is really important. And actually, Michelle Obama said in her memoirs, Becoming, if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's the power of using your voice. And using your voice, actually, it means all sorts of things, whether that be pacing and punctuating your talk. It also means the speed, you know, not going so fast that you're rattling through the material, but also being slow enough so that your audience really get the point. Pauses, for me, and the powerful pauses, are the ones where the message hits home in the space between the words. So if you think about that, if you want something to land with impact, you really need to remember to pause, because if you don't, and you just go from one point to another, what happens is the audience are like carrying along with you and not really sort of digesting anything. And again, if you pause, it just gives you time to breathe and brings a full stop, if you like, to that moment before you move on. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is personality. So when I just spoke about being fast in a presentation and remembering to punctuate by pausing and stopping once in a while, it's not wrong, I don't think, to be quick. And if you look at someone like Simon Sinek, who is a great motivational speaker, he's got lots and lots of videos on YouTube, really, really engaging guy. He is fast. He's really fast when he speaks. But because he does bring pauses into it, because he does use repetition to drive his point home, and because he uses a lot of rhetorical questions when he asks the audience things, it gets the participants to think. And what it also does is his energy just carries you along. And that's personality. And that's kind of my last P, is personality, because I think if you can inject your own personality into your speeches, you won't be going far wrong. And you know, it's really tempting to sometimes want to emulate or copy other people. I know that as quite a young trainer, I saw someone in the company I was working with at the time, and they were really funny. And I wanted that. You know, I knew that an audience liked to laugh, so I wanted to be funny. So I used to learn their lines and their quips and their jokes, and I used to deliver it in what I thought was exactly the same way that they delivered it in, but no one ever laughed. Literally, it was like tumbleweed was going through the audience. So in the end, I didn't try to be them anymore. I just did me. And I think that's the thing that I really want to leave you with, is just be yourself. But being authentic, remember, doesn't mean not being on your A game. And I think that's quite an important point, is that inject the personality, but know that you still need to put the work in, you still need to do the prep, you still need to do the practice. If I share my last couple of slides with you, I want to finish on a quote, actually. And that quote is, he says, "We do not need magic to transform our world. We carry all the power we need inside ourselves already." And that message of self-belief is something that you can carry with you, knowing that you are good enough. You just need to unlock it. And you just need to practice. And maybe that really is my final P. I'll have a sixth P if you don't mind. And that is practice. Because if you practice, you know that you can get there. Because if you're, you know, Oprah, let's take Oprah. She's amazing. She's one of the best public speakers I've ever seen. She, my goodness, has personality, and she injects it into her speech. But she didn't become like that overnight. She has learned through continual feedback and continual evolution and adjustment. And I think that's all you need to do, is just be open to that feedback. Ask your friends to listen to you as you prepare your speech. Video yourself and watch it back. Honestly, it's one of the best ways to learn. And it's practice that will help you. Yes, you might make a few mistakes here and there, but be willing to own those and adjust and find what works for you. Take some of the strategies and the tips that I've shared with you tonight and work out what you feel comfortable with and what is you in your own personality. And honestly, when you do that, you will become more confident as a public speaker. Stop sharing. That brings my speech to a close. I'm going to just have a look at the Q&As just to see what people are saying, and just give you, in sort of 5 or so minutes, just give you a few of my answers to those. The first question, I'm smiling because the first question is, how do I use PowerPoints or visual aids more effectively? And there's a couple of things I would say about this. One is, never rely on your visual aids so much that you don't know what you're talking about. I've seen so many people who just basically write their script on the PowerPoint and read it out. Oh my God, it's death by PowerPoint, isn't it? So keep your slides really brief, bullet points, lots of visuals, and they are then a backdrop. I really learned the power of this actually once, where my tech completely broke in one of my training sessions a few years ago, and I literally just had to deliver it without any PowerPoint backup. And it really taught me the importance of you know, knowing what you're talking about and having the PowerPoint as just an aid. Nice big picture, a few bullet points, big enough text so people can read. And then the next question is about reading your speech out. Is it okay to just read your speech out? No, I would say, sorry. I say no because I feel like if you want more presence and impact, and if you want to engage an audience, you can't read. You can't read it. I would have bullet points as notes, and I've got bullet points here just to remind myself what I'm supposed to be saying in what order. But at the end of the day, if you just read your speech out verbatim, it becomes very flat. And I actually again, I was on a video call about 3 weeks ago, and someone did this in a webinar, and it was just boring. Sorry, it was. So that's my answer to that. Vinny says, what's my best way to recover if I end up going on a tangent? Yeah, okay, so have your notes, I would say, bring it back to the bullet points. I would also give yourself time to sort of bring back to the subject. So if you're going off on a tangent, just stop. Maybe just say, I could go on about this subject a lot, but I'd like to bring it back to the topic in hand, and maybe I'll follow up with a document on that particular other thing. If you don't, you've got to realize you've got to listen to yourself. I think that's the thing, is that to be present is really important. If you listen to what you're saying and you're really focused, rather than skipping on in your head about what you've got to come next or worrying about what you're doing with your hands, if you really focus in the moment and listening to yourself, then if you're going off on a tangent, you'll catch it and you can bring yourself back. Somebody's asked about tips on preventing a blotchy rash. I'm going to deal with that actually on the next subject, because all of that under getting our nerves under control is quite a big subject, and I think it's a really good question. I used to have a blotchy rash for years, and I just ended up having to forget about it in the end. What would you do if you suddenly forgot what you were trying to say? Yeah, I would ask a question, probably. It gives yourself time to think, and let your audience or your participants do some work for a while, and then it brings you back. And I would also pause and breathe, like take a breath, take a drink of water. I always have a glass of water handy, just to get a moment. And then I'm going to take one more and then hand over to Sally. So someone has said, if you have ever been criticised, hang on, I'll start that again. If you ever have been criticised during the speech, what would my reaction be? Okay, so I've been heckled a lot of times, mainly with very rowdy London consultants, I have to say, particularly when we've been doing quizzes and games. Those of you that work at KGA will remember this. And I think there's two things, isn't there? There's the people that are kind of criticising or heckling because they're trying to get one up on you, or there's the people that actually their intention is pure, and they just want they want to make a point or understand something better. And I think what I've tried to do always is think positively about my participants from the outset, and assume that people are coming with the best of intentions. And then if I have been criticised and I feel like it's valid, then and it's something I can correct at the time, then I'll correct it. To be honest with you, in my experience, there's not been many people who have actually criticised my own speaking style. Not because I'm great or anything, but just because I think it's one of those things where if you engage your audience well, then they're kind of carried up in what you're saying, perhaps. Okay, so I'm going to end there before we run out of time, and I'm going to hand back to Sally to close. I hope it's been useful.
It's been brilliant. It's been so fascinating. I don't know if you can hear me. I hope you can. We've really enjoyed it, and I don't think you can ever stop learning about this kind of thing. I've been presenting for a long time, and I find it challenging at times, still nervous every time I do it. I enjoy it in the end. This is my book that I recommend. You can't really see it, but it's Talk Like TED. I read it about once a year. It has some really good tips in there, and I know we've talked about TED Talks. They are brilliant ways to just kind of see good presentations being made. Do join us again on the 16th of June if you can, about controlling nerves. The rash is definitely something that I have. Quite often I'll wear a scarf or a polo neck and look like I'm wrapped up for the winter. But we'll really look forward to welcoming you then. And if you have any questions for Georgina in the meantime, do get in touch with us at CW, and we'd be really happy to forward those on. So thank you. But for now, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.